My fellow nerds and nerdettes, welcome to part 4 of my top 40 video game soundtracks. If you've been here from the start of part 1, thanks for sticking around. At the end of the video, I'll have a full list of every honorable mention I've featured in this countdown, as well as the rest of the games I had written down that have great music, but didn't make the cut. And that includes every song and game featured in the intros of each of these parts. I've also added a rule that applies only to the top 10, but I'll mention it when we get there, just saying. The only other difference is that this video may contain minor to major spoilers unlike the last few videos due to the increased detail I go into, but I'll give a heads up beforehand. If there's a game you don't want spoiled, feel free to use the timestamps. Other than that, you should know the drill by now, and if not, links to parts 1, 2, and 3 will be in the description. I strongly recommend watching all of them if you haven't yet, because I really enjoyed making this series, and I think you will enjoy listening to it as well. So, kick back and relax, grab some popcorn, some tea, perhaps some salt, take off your pants, whatever works for you, and get comfortable because this is the longest video I've ever made. Without further ado, these are my top 10 favorite video game soundtracks of all time. Starting off the top 10, we have a game that won't surprise anybody who played it. A game with a minimal amount of dialogue that tells its story almost entirely through its overworld, its silent adversaries, the actions of the main character, and, most relevantly, its music. Shadow of the Colossus, one of Sony's all-time greatest games with a musical score equally as legendary. I won't spoil too much because it's a masterwork in game design that should be experienced firsthand, rather than hearing it secondhand from me, so I'll try to keep it simple. The game starts with music like the one you're hearing now, a haunting chorus with light, ethereal instrumentation that evokes a sense of ancient mysticism in this forbidden land you've traveled to. But of course, you're here for a specific reason, to seek out and defeat the massive, monstrous colossi with nothing but your sword, your bow, your trusty steed, and an extreme amount of willpower, or perhaps foolishness, to rescue the life of the one you love. The sheer impossibility of one young man accomplishing this on his own is portrayed through its music too. When you first approach them, you get a bit of a warning. Of course, you do not heed said warning. When the fights with the Colossus start up, these intense, booming orchestral songs drive the stakes up to 11. then, eventually, after the long and arduous struggle against the Titanic boss, your epic, glorious victory theme, which... is not quite what you'd normally expect, but, well, like I said, I don't want to spoil it. I'll just say that the final battle theme really hits different than the rest of them for all the right reasons. For a PS2 game, it was a surprisingly immersive experience. Its predecessor, Ico, and its distant successor, The Last Guardian, also have their moments that operate in interesting ways. But Shadow of the Colossus understandably left the biggest impression on gamers, and without its incredible music, it just wouldn't be the same. Look at me. Look at me! Look at my avatar. Look at my gamer tag. Look at my Twitter handle. Come on. You knew this was coming at some point. If you didn't see this coming, you are a faker and probably sus. Just saying. Yeah, this entry is a no-brainer for me. It's been prominent in the thumbnail since part 1 after all. Nights is a series set in the magical world of dreams, and its music really takes you there. There are 2 games in the series, and I love them both, so if I had to choose one, and yes, I do have to, I gotta go with Nights, Journey of Dreams. There are a couple things that just barely push it over the first game for me. Yes, Journey of Dreams does reuse a lot of music from the original, but they were all completely remade, and in my opinion that may be a hot take, they are all better than the originals. Every single one. Fight me. Obviously we had higher sound quality on the Wii than we did on the Sega Saturn, but the new versions also just have more impact, more oomph, more pizzazz. However, the main reason I chose it over the original is that I think the new original stage themes are better and do an incredible job making you feel like you're in a magical dreamlike wonderland. And the bombastic boss themes are also great. You can tell just by listening that this was made by the musical masterminds at Sonic Team. And yet, it hits so differently than the stuff they make for Sonic games. It's full of magical, whimsical vibes unlike anything I had played before, being the game that made me feel like a kid again more than any other when I played it back in like 2015. And I know many people consider it to be, well, a bad game, but fuck you, just saying. At least it's nowhere near as bad as its awful spiritual successor, Balan Wonderworld, even though that game has some pretty good music in it too, not gonna lie. It's just too bad this series never saw a proper revival, and considering what happened with its creator, we will never see one. Anyway, yes, this entry does kind of contradict what I've said about super happy-go-lucky kind of music in previous parts. I can't help it with this one. Nights' music is above and beyond what we expect out of admittedly very simplistic and fairly small games like this. Its main theme, Dreams Dreams, is definitely corny as hell, but I can't help but fucking love it, including when they have the kids sing it, which is just so undeniably adorable. No matter what people say, I will always love this series.
In a dream I can see you are not far away. Anytime, any place, I can see your face. You are that special one that I've been waiting for, and I hope you're looking for someone like me.
In my dreams, I can hear you calling me. In the night, everything's so sweet. In your eyes, I feel there's so much inside.
In the night, dream delight, I want to see you standing there. In the night, dream delight, I've found someone who really cares.
In the night, dream delight, I want to see you smile again. In the night, dream delight, you are the one I waited for.
And for the next one, we're going to the opposite end of the spectrum. And I'm trying really hard to fight my recency bias on this one, and my genre bias, and my artist bias. But I can't. Or maybe I don't need to. Maybe it really is just that good. That's right, my fellow goats. This is the game that really got robbed at the Game Awards last year for Best Soundtrack, Metal Hellsinger. And no, this game doesn't break any of my rules. The entire soundtrack is an original heavy metal score created by a duo of composers named Two Feathers, with guest vocalists from several famous and not so famous metal bands. And every single song kicks so much ass. To keep it brief, this game is a hybrid rhythm and first-person shooting and combat game that requires you to match your shots and melee attacks with the beat of the music. It's pretty tough. If you want to know what I thought about the game itself, go check out my Top Games of 2022 video. For now, we're here to enjoy the music.
When all said and all done, a dying sun in front of me. When all said and all done, bright colors crack and fade to gray. A vow of devotion, it crumbles into drifting ash. Do you feel what I feel? This devastation seems to comfort me.
Every stage has a unique song specifically for the atmosphere and intensity of it, making each stage feel like a step towards your ultimate goal of overthrowing the Red Judge, a powerful overlord of hell, with each stage and song becoming more intense than the previous one.
We stay silent no more. So afraid of all these forces, this gets an actual justice. Bring down the apocalypse of mankind. So afraid of all these forces, this race will carry on justice. Bring down the apocalypse of your crown.
But what really makes this game's soundtrack blaze is how it works in-game. When you start the stage, you can only hear the drums, and as you get your score multiplier up, more instruments come into the mix, with the vocals kicking in when you're at the maximum 16 times multiplier, meaning the music itself not only kicks ass, but kicks your ass, directly encouraging you to play the game well. It's a brilliant way to fuse music with gameplay, and I cannot wait to see more come out from this game, which is already confirmed, and holy shit, it's one of my favorites. Oh man. But anyway, what we have in-game already are a ton of incredible vocalists, with Michael Stana of the amazing Dark Tranquillity doing the most work on this game, including the main boss themes. I've seen people call this an amazing metal album with a game attached, and I don't blame them. Even though it's short compared to some soundtracks out there, it's incredible from start to finish without a single dud, and that deserves accolades. And it all culminates with the psychotic final boss theme, an absolutely impeccable portrayal of a showdown between you and a raging mad demon who is deathly afraid of losing her grip on power. Featuring a vocalist I was honestly shocked and absolutely stoked to see in this game. I'll play this entry out with that song, so if you don't want it spoiled, feel free to skip to the next entry. For the rest, my fellow goats.
Game the fuck on!
remember number 11 on my list? That was an entry that I thought might be very controversial, that may ignite arguments among fans. This is another one of those. Zelda. And just like number 11, this was another one that was extremely difficult to decide on, obviously because The Legend of Zelda has many games with very unforgettable music, but also, if you're like me and got into it in the late 90s, there are probably a few standout games that you could recite every single song of, because they were integral to your growing love of gaming in general. It would have been easy to just pick one that I'm very biased towards and call it a day. In fact, believe it or not, I was very tempted to pick Link's Awakening, the original, definitely not the remake. Fuck the remake, just saying. Link's Awakening proves that you can use music to bring a very basic pixel art world to life in your imagination, even with extremely limited hardware. On the other hand, another runner-up I had was Skyward Sword, a game which I admittedly don't like very much, but has an incredibly long, impressive, fully orchestrated soundtrack. And then there's Twilight Princess, a game full of incredible high fantasy-inspired music that immerses you into its rich and detailed world. But even Twilight Princess wouldn't have been the same if not for its predecessor and inspiration, a game whose music was made famous due to its direct implementation into the game via an instrument that you could play at any time, making the music a very important part of the experience. I could go on and on and on about how each game has incredible music like a fanboy, but I have to pick just one to represent this entry, and I think the spot belongs to the one game that bucks the trend of the series, that's able to tell a very different story all on its own, even without the game accompanying it. Yes, Majora's Mask, a game that cannot seem to escape my mind and even my subconscious, and will probably live rent-free in my head for eternity. There will be some moderate spoilers in this one, so be aware. The various versions of this game's main theme, like the one you're hearing now, perfectly portray what is happening in-game in Clocktown. As well as the panic of its impending apocalyptic doom, as the evil moon slowly creeps closer and closer to impact. To its final moments in one of the most haunting melodies ever made for a video game. For a game made by Nintendo, Majora's Mask and its music has some serious psychological horror vibes that I don't think they are capable of recapturing in the current year, but I hope to be proven wrong. And let's not forget the rest of the game's soundtrack too, including some follow-ups to the previous game's unforgettable ocarina songs that honestly really outshine it. The game is very tonally consistent with some serious, dour, and depressing themes for each of the regions trapped under the influence of Majora's darkness. There's no end to the unsettling undertones and subtext in every part of this game, including its 4 main dungeons, where the music generally takes a back seat to just be complementary to its atmosphere. Except for one, where the music is what drives and defines the accursed absurdity of this location. Stone Tower has by far one of my favorite songs in the entire series. Every time I replayed the game, I always looked forward to visiting this ungodly construct above all else because it's such a bizarre and unique location with some of the most oddly creepy music in the entire series. And just to drive the point home, this place flips all 3D Zelda dungeon design on its head, literally, by flipping it upside down in a logic-defying way with even creepier music, making it the first Zelda dungeon with more than one theme, I think. Majora's Mask is a very unforgettable game for various reasons, its soundtrack being one of them. Its music is full of both overt and subtle emotion, sadness, a sense of dread, and occasionally gets a bit wacky when appropriate. It's impressive to think that Koji Kondo was able to express all of this without using quote-unquote real instruments, opting for MIDI programs all the way up until Skyward Sword in 2011, or Mario Galaxy in 2007 if we go outside Zelda. Majora's Mask was released only 2 years after Ocarina of Time, making its development very short in comparison to other 3D Zelda games, which only makes it all the more impressive that they were able to make something so compelling in such a short time. Lightning in a bottle, I suppose, as I haven't felt the same with any other Nintendo game since, and without its fitting and moody soundtrack, I don't think its impact would be nearly as powerful. Another likely controversial choice for this list, Final Fantasy. I've seen wildly varying opinions on this series throughout the years, so I should preface this by saying that I do not have nearly as much experience with this series as many of the die-hard fans out there, so I'm just going to rip the bandage off quickly and say it. Final Fantasy X. Yeah, 13-year-old me would kill me if I didn't pick this one. But like I did with previous entries, I listened back to some of the runners-up I had that I played. 7, 12, the 13 trilogy, and 15. And like any Final Fantasy fan will tell you, all of them have great music. However, none of them hit nearly as close in an emotional way as Final Fantasy X does. Though what you're hearing now is a heavy metal intro song that was just plain cool at the time, the rest of the game's soundtrack hits differently. Very differently. If you thought the previous entry was an emotional game, you ain't heard nothing yet till you play this one. While looking up what I needed for this entry, I caught a few streamers' first time reactions to the game. It was like reliving all those emotions I felt playing this game so long ago, and many of them commented on the brilliant musical moments the game had. This song, To Xanarkand, is one of the most famous songs in the entire series, as it hits you right in the feels via a flash-forward scene immediately when you start a new game. As you gaze upon what looks like a desolate ruin, every character is silent and still with their weapons cast aside, downcast, as if the will to carry on was lost. Maybe. There are a lot of emotional moments, with the music doing its part every time to drive that moment home. Without it, it probably would just seem like an absurd fantasy plot with a cheesy love story to go with it. But it gets real deep, requiring you to pay close attention to the finer details of what's really going on. I think one song that exemplifies this is the Hymn of the Faith, a recurring religious theme sung by many of the game's characters for various reasons. Not just the game's characters on screen either, as there are different versions of the song echoing in each chamber of the aeons you summon, as if it's being sung in perpetuity for hundreds of years by, well, I won't spoil it, as you should experience this game's story yourself. It's a fantastic way to work the soundtrack into the narrative of the game, but there's more. If there's one element that's very prominent in this game's setting, it's the element of water. And as it should, many of the game's songs have a softly flowing, meditative, or calming feeling to them. And for every few songs that feel like gentle raindrops, even in the most dangerous regions, There is also a loud, energetic torrent, such as another one of the game's most memorable songs, its main battle theme. This is another prime example where you can clearly hear the progressive rock influence on Japanese video game music, this time from Nobuo Uematsu, the series' most famous composer. But this masterpiece of a soundtrack was not just his work, as it was a team effort with Masashi Hamauzu, who also did the amazing work in Final Fantasy XIII, and Junya Nakano, making it the first game with more than just Uematsu at the helm. And I think it resulted in the best music of the series, that I've heard so far. The vibrant, emotional, dynamic music ascended the world of Final Fantasy X to new heights, and set a new bar for video game music when it came out. If you're interested, there is a very, very interesting Final Fantasy X progressive rock concept album rendition by Mark Papagan that I highly recommend looking into if you love the music of this series, which I will link in the description. Not something I would normally bring up in this video series, but it's easily the greatest video game music cover I've ever heard, so I have no choice but to shout it out. Just saying. But yeah, Final Fantasy X will always be the game that melts my cold, dead heart. And no, I'm not playing 10-2. Never. Look at me. Oh yeah, baby, that's right. This is another obvious entry that you should have seen coming by now. Remember what I said in number 9? Yeah, that's right. Sonic Team. I'm just gonna say it. Back in the day, Sonic was better than Mario. His adrenaline-pumping action platforming coupled with some undeniably stylish video game music helped put Sega on the map in the early 90s. Since then, Sonic Team has consistently put out smash hit after smash hit for this series of music, even for the games that really suck. so it actually was a bit hard to decide on this one as well. You can pick any mainline Sonic game and find some excellent music to go along with it, from the iconic 16-bit catchiness of the originals. To the wild modern music that was good enough to make an otherwise poor game surprisingly enjoyable. Even though I don't even like this style of music normally, and there's even some that wasn't done by Sonic Team themselves. And hell, even when they tried something different and got some other artists involved, for a game that's one of my guilty pleasures.
Waking up, breaking out. This is what it's like to be free. Rip it up, tear it down. This is what it means to be free. Jet sounds a distant roar behind you.
But if you're like me, and you witness Sonic's rise and fall, and possible recent second rise throughout the years, there is one specific time period where the series peaked, both in terms of gameplay and its thematic music, and it was during the short lifespan of the Sega Dreamcast. That's right, Sonic Adventure 1 versus Sonic Adventure 2. Both games that could easily be in my top 10 if I didn't limit myself to one per franchise. And I think the one that wins, but just barely, is Sonic Adventure 2. There's one very major difference between both games' soundtrack. In Sonic Adventure 1, each stage theme is made specifically for each stage, meaning when you visit each location with different characters, you'll hear the same music, with some exceptions of course. In Sonic Adventure 2, every stage is different, and the music is tailored to not just the location, but also the character's personality, and even their current mental state or mood, making all of them radically different from each other, such as with Sonic's consistently energetic punk and rock style songs. Tails, who is a character always following in Sonic's footsteps, with music cleverly made to be the most reminiscent of Sonic Adventure 1. Knuckles, whose music is so self-explanatory with his funky urban vibes with very prominent lyrics, as he's the kind of character that wears his heart on his sleeve, especially with the hard-hitting track of his first stage, Wild Canyon, where he's absolutely pissed, yet trying very hard to keep his cool.
They playing with the wrong guy. Heck, I don't know. That's what
Never seen a mic hog spit like a menace. Wild canyon fun, I gotta chase a bat, huh? Yeah, rude, she's sexy and smooth. A double cross by thief, that's out for my juice, I'm feeling her in mysterious ways. That's why I stay on point like every single day. I gotta protect this place, I do it for my race, Yeah, you know how it is.
And Eggman, with methodical techno rock tunes that incorporate his current situation and location into his music more than any other, as he is an intelligent, adaptable observer type. Then we have Rouge, whose music is quite different from the rest of the cast, and changes a bit over the course of the game, starting with a calm, relaxing lounge style in Dry Lagoon, as she is just doing what she wants. Then her music gets increasingly intense, ending with a wild and crazy jazz theme that's all over the place, as she begins to rethink and question her goals. And lastly, we have Shadow, with his duality of strictly instrumental hard rock similar to Sonic as he completes his mission with ease. And sinister electro-metal tracks with distorted vocals as he pursues his enemy, which includes probably the most interesting contrast we see between Sonic and Shadow when they are in the exact same setting. Yeah, Sonic Adventure 2 perfectly captures everything with these characters and its over-the-top story, with music that's just plain cool on the surface, but has a lot going for it. For a child of the 90s, it was everything I wanted from a 3D Sonic game. Well, except the lack of a hub world to just run around in, but oh well. And yeah, I probably greatly overanalyzed the music of a game that's supposed to just be simple and fun, but hey, it's the music that hits deep that stays with you, whether it was intentional or not. Oh, and I don't want to hear any accusations of me just picking my childhood favorites and calling it a day, as every game after this I played as an adult from about 2012 onwards, just saying. But I can still listen to and greatly enjoy pretty much every single song from Sonic Adventure 2 to this day, especially this one, a song that stands out from the rest of the game, representing the beginning of Shadow's redemption. I told you we would get here eventually. The Legend of Heroes. Considering all the content I made about this series in recent years, it should come as no surprise that it's this high on the list, right? Falcom's got some musical wizards on board, and without them, this series would not be so highly regarded by me and many others who have delved deep into its rich lore and complex history. You can pick any game from this series out of a hat, pop its music on, and have a good time. So, how did I go about choosing just one? Well, I didn't. I've known for a long time, but I wasn't fully committed until recently when I went back and put on the music of every game in the series because of a video I have in mind after this one. But what I realized by listening back is that by the time Trails of Cold Steel came around, the series and its music had sort of lost its identity and felt kind of phoned in compared to previous games in the series, seemingly opting to chase modern anime trends instead, but still had some interesting things going for it every now and then. If you remember what I said back in part 2 at number 25 about another Falcom franchise that peaked musically in 2006, well, Trails peaked around the same time, and I knew I was in for a treat the first time I witnessed this intro to The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, the Third. I could tell just by this minimalist intro and the mysterious music that this game had some very interesting things hidden underneath. And holy hell was I right, because it became my favorite game in the entire series. If you haven't played up to this point yet, I recommend not watching the screen just in case there are things you'd rather not see until you play it yourself. Or hell, if you don't want to spoil the musical experience for yourself either, feel free to skip this entry. Up to you. For those who stay, let me tell you why this game's soundtrack stuck out to me above the rest of them. Trails in the Sky the Third is a bizarre game compared to the rest of the series, taking place almost entirely in a new location that does not appear to be in Zemuria, but rather some sort of spiritual world. Naturally, the music reflects this, giving the game an identity that boldly stands out compared to the previous Trails in the Sky games. A lot of the music has a psychedelic feel to it, including the very unusual style of the new battle theme. Other times, you come across strange recreations of familiar places that are impossibly accurate to the real world, with music that gives off an unsettling spiritual vibe. Now, this is all well and good, but it's not where the game shines most. It shines most in the dark, as you gradually uncover and piece together what's going on in this macabre, disturbing, introspective story, with impressively gripping emotional moments that I don't think they have been able to achieve since. The music strongly drives the tone of every scene, more so in this game than any other in the series. I see a lot of people playing these games with voice acting modded into it, and I think that's a mistake. Well, voice acting in video games in general was a mistake, but that's another topic, just saying. That just distracts from the raw emotion that this game's music brings to every scene, whether it's the occasional flashback of Kevin's harrowing backstory. To the moment where the dangerous power inside of Kevin is brought forth into the limelight. To the twisted nature of the dark side of Zemuria that you learn about in some of the memory doors. The music of this game just pulls you in and doesn't let go, even through some of the other optional side stories and filler that the game throws at you. I can't express just how much I love this game and how it brought the series universe to life, and only gets better over time, with many of its side stories and lore slowly being realized as more games come out. Oh, and to top it all off, remember what I said in number 25 about Ryo Takashita? This was his game. He was the main composer for Sky the Third, and with an incredible prog rock final boss theme like this game has, it really shows. Man, I wish he stayed with Falcom so much. The Xeno series. This was the series responsible for reigniting my love for gaming, currently with 8 games that all have incredible music. Choosing one to represent this entry, however, was also another one of the most difficult choices to make in this list, up there with number 11 and number 7, because if I didn't limit this countdown to one entry per franchise, all of them would be on the list. It was easier to start by choosing which ones didn't make it. Xenosaga 1, while it was the first game of the series I played, and the main one responsible for my love for gaming again, is still good, but it's one of Yasunori Mitsuda's weaker works in my opinion. Maybe a hot take, but that's okay. Next was Xenosaga 2, which has some music that doesn't really match the feel of the series and what's going on, but still has some pretty cool moments to it, and will get my video copyright claimed if I play it, so moving on. Then there's Xenoblade 2, which is still my least favorite game in the series for various reasons, but its music is not one of them, because it has some incredible highlights, and so does its Torna expansion. Then there's Xenoblade 3, which is basically the most mid game of the series, which includes its music being right in the middle of my choices as well. It has a lot of really great musical moments, with my favorite being what they did with the Offseer flutes. Next, Xenosaga 3, for which composer Yuki Kajiura really stepped up her game after Xenosaga 2, creating an incredibly emotional and divine soundtrack that perfectly fit the events of the game, which admittedly was somewhat ruined by the way the last half of the saga was condensed into this one episode, but hey, details. Then there's Xenoblade X. This soundtrack, in a vacuum, without the game accompanying it, could have been my pick for the series. Swallowed in grief, images start to stalk like a beast. I hear voices, but no one talking to me. Unfortunately, the way Xenoblade X's minimal story plays out means there's so many incredible songs that go completely underutilized, to the point where when I listened to the soundtrack on its own, I was like, when the fuck did this song play in game? I can't even remember ever hearing it. Why? That left me with two choices. Xenogears, the oldest game in the series that is so much more than meets the eye. And Xenoblade Chronicles, a game I consider to be one of, if not the, greatest games ever made. This was definitely the most painful decision to make so far. However, I did hint at it earlier in this countdown. Remember in part 1 when I said this? And I noticed that Chrono Trigger's music has a lot of similarities to another game on this countdown. We'll get there soon enough. Hopefully. If you ask people what they consider the greatest soundtracks of all time, even the most normie of gamers will probably have some RPG from this era on their list. For many, it was Chrono Trigger. For others, Final Fantasy VI or VII. Some might even say Secret of Mana. Hell, I've even heard some people say Super Mario RPG. But for me, Xenogears is my Chrono Trigger. It's no surprise either that these are both from the same legendary composer, Yasunori Mitsuda. His work on Xenogears is an amazing example of how to enhance the subtext of what's going on at any point in the game's near voiceless story. And similar to the previous entries on this list, Mitsuda heavily leaned on Celtic folk influences in his music for this game, which is an unusual choice for a sci-fi game to say the least. But consider what's happening in the setting. On this planet, many people live in what would be considered extremely primitive for something that takes place around 15,000 years into the future. So I think the old folk themes are quite fitting. Eventually, you'll find yourself ascending with your technology and power, with glorious themes to go along with it. But it even knows how to send you back in time again when you're thrown into the dirt, only to climb back out with a catchy song that sounds straight out of the late 80s. Or, mild spoiler warning, when you start to unravel the truth of what's going on, and you get some of the most ominous themes I've ever heard that give Metroid a run for its money. And when the battles heat up, this game has an aura of dire seriousness to it, especially with the final boss theme. Xenogears is a difficult game to go back to, as you can see in the visuals that it hasn't aged well, and if you got your hands on it, you'd be able to tell the gameplay hasn't either. But its story and soundtrack have so much weight to them that compel you to see it through to the end regardless. And this may be a hot take, but I think this soundtrack is a step up from Chrono Trigger by Mitsuda, but that may just be down to personal bias. It also has one of my favorite credits themes, that features the beautiful vocals of Joanne Hogg, an English singer most known for Iona, a Christian-themed Celtic-inspired progressive rock and folk band. If that sounds like a heavenly combination to you, go give their music a listen, after you listen to her wonderful work on this song.
Run through the cold of the night as passion burns in your heart, ready to fight, a knife held close by your side, like a proud wolf alone in the dark, with eyes that watch the world, and my name like a shadow on the face of the moon. Broken mirror, a million shades of light, the old echo fades away, but just you and I can find the answer, and then we can run to the end of the world. We can run to the end of
It's weeb shit JRPG time once again. However, for this one, being this high on the list is absolutely mandatory for those who have played it. If you haven't, well, strap yourselves in because it's complicated. It's another entry by Gust, who have already been featured twice on this whole countdown, deservedly so, but this series has been lost to obscurity and doesn't really get talked about much anymore. If you ask me, you can blame much of that on Nisa, who really botched the localization of these games and somehow even made the second game broken in the process. Nice job. Anyway, R. Tenelico. So in order to explain why this series' music is some of the best, I have to explain what it's about first. There are 3 R. Tenelico games, with a 4th game called R. No Surge, with a tie-in visual novel that's basically a series prequel. Sort of. I think. It's also complicated. We won't get into that one anyway because its music is inferior to the trilogy in my opinion. R. Tenelico is set in a very offbeat universe where the surface of the planet, RCL, is covered in a poisonous sea of death, and people instead live in sky-high Magitech towers that are maintained by practically immortal administrators known as Revitel Origins. The towers are mostly mechanical, but they function via symphonic power, which is generated whenever song magic is used throughout the world. Song magic can only be used by Revitels, who are all female artificial humans. In these games, song magic is used by Revitels for various things, including combat, healing, interacting with special technology, and even altering the towers themselves. In addition, a Revitel's song magic power is enhanced by forming a bond with a normal human, where they are able to dive into her mind to witness and help work through her mental and emotional issues, which usually means having to suffer through anime dating sim cringe, but it gets real deep and dark sometimes. Because of all this, many of the game's songs play a very important role in this universe and story, with an unusual style to them, having names that resemble lines of code or programs, while having a divine, powerful, and emotional aura to them, fittingly referred to as hymnos. The vocal style is often bizarre and very Japanese, but the developers also made an entirely original language specifically for this setting and these songs, and they alternate between this language and Japanese, giving them a one-of-a-kind identity that's unlike anything I have ever experienced before. But I have to pick one for this entry. The hymnos all stand out as incredible pieces of music, with all three games being easy contenders for this spot, which made this entry very difficult. I remember at one point leaning towards the third game, because while it does have some annoying ones, it also has what may be the best hymnos in the series, and possibly some of the greatest video game songs I have ever heard.
希望の光の中待ち続けたこの時に揺さぶられて目覚める心尊い母なる地に
Except, that's not the entirety of each game's music. If the hymnos of each game are all so good that I can't decide on which one is better without going into extreme nitpicking mode, then I have to choose based on the entirety of each game's soundtrack. And that, my friends, made the choice incredibly easy. It's true, all three games have incredible soundtracks even outside of their hymnos, but the first game, Ar Tonelico, Melody of Alemia, is still the best. Like with Blue Reflection, whenever Gus tries something new, it's like they strike gold. This game has a wide variety of themes, including exotic instrumentals for the various regions like the flute piece you're hearing now, to some hard-hitting rock songs. And even some funky mystic rhythms. It also has a very catchy battle theme.
Check it out. Well, it's the lyrical paragraphs, your tracks make me laugh. You're on a microphone, you did fast math. Science, the main ingredient to be the finest of the fittest. You did it, yo, I ain't with it. You failed, though the last one remains in the top 10. Stop looking, listen, get cross to the light skin. Knowledge is the key to be the best of the black man. Wisdom understands the ways of a judgment.
Wait, what the fuck was that? Random rap lines in the middle of the song, I guess. But you know what? I can't help but love the game's quirkiness whenever it throws in a curveball like that, which it even does with its hymnos. music does what it does best, whisking you away to a magical world that does not operate on conventional logic. It's easy to get lost in the intricacies of this game's lore, which includes its wonderful music playing a major role in everything that is happening. If you're interested in finding out more of this series, the physical games are exceedingly rare and kind of expensive these days, and for some of them, there's even a chance that they are faulty, which I unfortunately had to deal with once, so you're better off just getting the ROMs. There are even patched versions that have mended the scars Nisa left on the series, as well as a fully relocalized version of the second game, so I highly recommend them. They will hit you in the feels. Just like they did once again as I made this entry, like when I read the name of this song, and remembered what it meant.
鮮やかに燃える緑新しい小さき命永遠に安らぎ水辺に集う鳥たち水面に揺れる太陽日々は風にきらめき枝を鳴らして
Unlike previous entries, my number 1 has firmly stayed at number 1, whereas throughout the course of making this video series, a lot of them got moved around as I went along. For example, Metal Hellsinger was much lower in my initial list, while the 2 Super Nintendo games at 17 and 16 were a lot higher, or Undertale at number 23, which wasn't even on the list until I gave it another listen. Kingdom Hearts, Freedom Planet, and Rabby Ribby were also on the list at first, but ultimately got pushed back to number 41 and beyond. Even my number 2, 3, and 4 are so close to each other that I could not decide on a final order for them until right before I started recording this video, and I'll probably change my mind sometime after this too. But number 1 is number 1. There is no contest, no argument otherwise. I would go as far as to say that it's the greatest work of music I have ever heard, be it from video games or music as a whole. And if you know me, or have heard me talk about it in private or in a previous video, you may already know what it is simply by process of elimination. If not, you will after I mention the runner-up I had for this entry, Drakengard 3. Drakengard 3 does an excellent job reflecting the beautifully twisted, violent nature of the Drakengard universe. It is a masterpiece all on its own, full of haunting vocals and intense symphonic and metal pieces, while you rip and tear through your adversaries as the violent psychopath intoner Zero with her smooth brain of a dragon partner. Even though the game had some severe technical problems, it didn't stop me from enjoying the hell out of it and its soundtrack. But yeah, with that out of the way, you know what the real number one is. Except there's two. Nier Gestalt / Replicant and Nier Automata. Two games that, if not limited by my one per franchise rule, would be number one and number two. They are both that good. But if you've been here since the start, you probably already noticed what the rule I added for the top 10 was. In previous parts, I allowed more than one game in the same franchise that were relatively close to share the spotlight. But no, not this time. For the top 10, I forced myself to make the decision instead of being an indecisive fuck. But damn, it's another very, very painful one. My number one soundtrack of all time is Nier, Gestalt and Replicant. As heartbreaking as it is to not have Automata on here, there was never any doubt in my mind that Nier deserves a top spot. Ever since I played it in like 2013, it always stuck out to me as a beautifully subversive experience like no other, that goes above and beyond the storytelling and artistic standards of video games at the time, including its music, and remains above the vast majority of them to this day, achieving things that are not possible in other forms of media. But you wouldn't know that just by looking at it. I'm going to try and not spoil anything too major in this entry, as you should also experience this game yourself, in the way it was intended. The music was composed by Monaka, a semi-independent group of musicians led by Keiichi Okabe that works with many video game and anime studios. Most of the game's vocals are from the wonderful voice of Emmy Evans, who, if you can hear in the song I just played, is singing in a language that was completely made up by her specifically for this series. The reason for this being that they didn't want the lyrics to distract from the gameplay and story. If it was sung in a recognizable language, I think I agree that it would. So instead of conveying words, the vocal's sole purpose is to harmonize and convey emotion, and it does so masterfully. It even gives the most mundane parts of the game some life and makes them more interesting than they would be otherwise. But you'll probably notice, even alongside the most upbeat sounding instrumental parts, there is always a lingering sadness throughout the entire game. Well, maybe with the exception of some of the more intense fights of the game, which are fast-paced, booming, and imposing to say the least. Holy shit, this song is so chaotically weird, I can't help but love it. And all of the other boss themes bring the tension and despair of the game up to 12. But the music also gets very subdued at just the right moments, one of which, oddly enough, being right when you begin your assault on the final boss's lair. This unusual atmosphere and sense of unease expressed through the game's music is a large part of what makes it so unforgettable. Nier left me speechless when I played it. What began as just an uncommon video game story of a man doing anything and everything to rescue his daughter turned into something much, much greater. Something very special.
Haslat erin spår. Jo, dat göra dig kuhare. Finally, oh, yo. Mikiata jag kokran no hej, kai mirakarat. Yo, dat göra dig kuhare. Finally, oh, yo. Mikiata jag kokran no hej, yama. Take I mirakarat.
And in 2021, we got a remastered version of the game, featuring all new renditions of the original game's music. And to be honest, I don't even need to talk about it. They are still incredible, but the original game's music was already so good that it would have still been my number one, whether I factored in the new versions or not. And to top it off, this music did something that most other music is unable to do for me. Nier's music is absolutely stunning when played live. Sadly, I have not had the privilege of seeing it in person, but the live renditions of this game's soundtrack are just as incredible as the originals. And this is coming from someone who otherwise never listens to live music. And with that, this is the end of my top 40 video game soundtracks of all time.
battle is done. The squadrons of night can't conquer the day, nor shadows extinguish the sun. Stories of danger, fearless attack, specters of blade and pain. All of these ghosts of Pharaoh, delusions come back, and we'll be haunted again, haunted again. For though the storms are over and past, though the thunders rage, peace quieted at last, while these nightmares laid me down in the wrecks here to mourn, here to mourn. The night has left us crippled with grief as he strive to keep alive our belief, but a loss so great. The clouds all around for the dawn, hidden so deep in veils of deceit, imprisoned in twisting spells. Are we the plaything of fiends, or merely the dreams that we're telling ourselves, telling our stories of danger, fearless attack?